Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hi friends, so welcome back, and today we are going to talk about emotional design. We would like to understand how can we put emotions into the design of the services or the products that we are creating for the end users. Okay, so the very first thing that we have to understand is a term which is known as emotional design, which has become very popular among the designers and among the UX researchers. So emotional design, what does it mean? It simply refers to creation of the designs that evoke emotions which result in positive user experiences. Now, why we would like to have a design which invokes positive user experience? The idea is very simple, right? Unless and until your user, let it be a product, let it be a service, experiences a positive emotion, the user will never come back for the services or for the products that you or your organization is providing, right? So this is where the emotional design comes into the picture, where we want to insert the emotion into the design of a product or the services. Quite simple. Now, as of now, what happens? So commonly, the common practice is among the designers that while creating a product or a service, they tend to focus more on the user's need. That is, mostly they tend to focus on the usability of the product, right? And the functionalities of the product. While it is the basic thing that any user wants, but this is something that if you remember the UX pyramid, then in the UX pyramid, what happens that at the very bottom level, you have the functional diagram. Let me just quickly try to draw the UX diagram pyramid for you. If you do not recall, it's very simple. So for example, if you look at the UX pyramid, then what you have is at the bottom level you have a what we call it as a functional element. Then at the next level we have the reliable element. Then at the next level we have the element of the usability. On the top we have the convenience, right? And then on the very top you have something known as the enjoyability or enjoyable component. Now, what happens when the designers design a product or the services? Primarily they tend to focus on these three bottom aspects of a product or of a service. So which are mostly referring to the functionality, usability of a particular product, which is good to have. But nevertheless, if you go at the top of this UX pyramid, the user experience pyramid, then you can see that there is something which refers to the enjoyability or the convenience that the user is getting or having by using the product or the particular services that you or your organization is offering. And for the same reason, let me just quickly erase it, I think. And for the same reason, what happens that what we would like to do is we need to put proper focus on the upper aspects of the pyramid as well, which is the enjoyability and the convenience. So basically what they do, they put the focus on the responses of the user when the user is using a product or after the user has already used the product. And of course, when we talk about such experiences of the user when the user is experiencing the product, these are naturally emotional, and hence the term emotional design comes into the picture, right? So what happens when the user is using the product? So basically what happens that many times user is not even aware of the thing, but there are lots of sophisticated thought processes are going on at the cognitive level, through which the user is trying to process the functionalities, the experience, the usability and the enjoyability of the product. So we really need to pay attention to that particular process as well, those particular cognitive experiences and cognitive processes as well. And while doing so, what is our aim? Our aim is very simple. What we want to do, we want to elicit strong emotions in the users so that these emotions can create a type of bond with the product or with the services that we are offering, that your organization is offering. And in turn, what happens? It creates a sense of brand value, it creates a sense of loyalty, and hence it allows, it enables your customers to take a particular action, which may be as simple as that, coming again and again to you for the use and of your product, of your services, right? And this all these aspects are known as the emotional design. And please mind one particular thing, that when we are talking about the emotional design of a product, many times we may not only want to induce a positive user experience, but a positive emotion. Not, of course, the user experiences should always be positive, but many times when we say that positive user experiences, it could be through the inducement of a positive emotion, but many times it could be through the inducement of a negative emotion as well. A very simple example: you want to create a movie, but then in the movie it's all about a horror movie. Now, when you are making your user watch a horror movie, of course the type of the emotions that are going to be elicited among the users are going to be scary, are going to be horror, right? I mean, the user cannot feel joyful about it, the user cannot feel happy about it, because the intended use is something quite different. You want to create a horror movie, but while if you have been able to successfully create or elicit that particular emotion among your users, it means your product, that is your movie or your service, has been successful, right? So while creating a emotional design, you have to keep this aspect into the mind, that you want to induce a positive user experience, which could be through a positive emotion, or many times which could be through a negative emotion as well. And the end goal is that, of course, it should be enjoyable. The user should be able to enjoy the product or the services that you are offering, right? Now, how to do that? So we will talk about 3 levels of design, which was proposed by Don Norman, very famous researcher, where what he proposed, that designers can aim to reach the users on 3 different cognitive levels. So one cognitive level is known as the visceral cognitive level. We will be talking more about it. Second level is known as the behavioral cognitive level, and the third level is known as the reflective cognitive level. So we will be talking more about it, that what exactly they are and how they are different. But whole idea is that we want to reach the users on these 3 different cognitive levels, so that users can develop positive associations with the product, and as I said, sometimes including negative emotions, and so that they can feel associated with the product, they can feel associated with the services, and it allows them to use it again, it allows them to enjoy it again, and hence guarantees the success of the product or the services that you are offering. Perfect. Now what we want to do, we want to understand the 3 levels of design as proposed by Don Norman. So if you can see this very beautiful diagram taken from the emotional design book, very famous book by the Don Norman himself. So it talks about the cognitive levels or the cognitive processes of the users happening at 3 different levels, right? So let us take it one by one. So the very first level is the visceral level. Now the visceral level is what? Visceral level is all about the initial impression. So it's all about the initial impression, it's all about the attractiveness that the users feel toward the product, towards the services. It's all about the pre-consciousness, and it's all about the initial feelings that the users are having while using a particular product or while using a particular services. A very simple example. Think of when you bought your first iPhone maybe, right? So iPhone could be a very good example of a very good product. So think about the instance when you bought your first iPhone, and think about the experience that you had when you were looking at the iPhone at the very first time, right? So maybe you were going through it and you were looking and you were saying, okay, my goodness, it's very slim, it's very responsive, the touch screen is very, very responsive. Well, maybe not the touch screen is very, very responsive, but maybe you are looking at the appearance. So please pay attention that the visceral cognitive level, it takes care of the initial impression only. So it has nothing to do with the usability. So maybe you are not still exploring the touch screen, but maybe you are just looking at the design and you are looking, okay, this is very, very slim, it's very lightweight, it looks so good, you know, very, very symmetric, and the box itself in which it arrives, like it's, you know, white box, usually it's a very nice box, very nice packing and everything. So far you start feeling good, you start feeling the positive emotions about the product itself, even without having used the product, even without having used the services of the product, which in this case is the iPhone, right? So this is how what you are getting is the initial impression of the product, and the way you get the initial impression of the product is simply by having the very first connection, very first reactions in response to looking at the product or in response to using of the services. So this all happens at the very motor level, right? It's mostly very subjective in this case, because one's experience can be very different from the someone else's experience. So someone may like a very symmetric design pattern, but someone may not like the very symmetric design pattern. So this is all very subjective. So this is again another aspect that you may want to keep in mind, that this particular initial impression that the user is having while looking at the product or the service at the very first time is the very subjective experience. Nevertheless, it's a very important type of experience that you may want to provide to the user. Initial impression, there is a saying like the first impression is the last impression many cases. So you want to create a very good impression, a very good first initial expression for your product or for your services to the user, and through whatever sensors, whatever sensory modalities that the users are perceiving it. So maybe there is something that the users are looking at it, so you want to create a very nice design so that this is appealing to the user. Maybe there is something that the users are touching it, so you want to create a very nice tactile perception so that the users are liking it. The initial impression itself is very good. Maybe you are creating a food, and the sensory perception that the users are going to use is through the smell, and you want to create a smell that is very good smell, right? So these are the ones that are creating the initial impression about the product, about the services. Now please pay attention to this particular thing, that the experiences that the users are having at the visceral level, they are completely free from any bias or any prejudice, right? And so it's there are not many factors that are adding to this particular thing, and it's sort of very controlled are happening in a very controlled fashion. One thing. Other thing, that while all these initial impressions or the processes that are happening at the visceral level while observing a particular product are very responsive, are very reactive, are very momentarily. So it may be very quick responses. You are not waiting for so long. You saw an iPhone and immediately you felt something. That's it, right? So within few seconds or within few milliseconds, microseconds, many times you felt something, and that response is already there, right? So you can see that response. So this is what is happening mostly at the visceral level. Now let us go to the higher level, which is what Don Norman is proposing, which is the behavioral level. Now the behavioral level is mostly, most of the thing it has to do with the usability of the particular product. It takes care of the usability, the performance or the effectiveness of the product or the services that you are offering, right? So as the name itself suggests, behavioral cognitive process, what we mean by the behavioral design is that once the user takes a particular product, let us again take the example of the iPhone only. The user first opens the box, makes the very first impression at the iPhone, likes the iPhone, but the next step is, of course, the user may want to and will have to use the product, right? It's all about the usability at the end. So the user would like to use the product. Now the user started using the product. Maybe the user liked the touch screen response, for example, as simple as that. Maybe the user liked the typing on the iPhone screen. Maybe the user liked the noise of the tick which was coming when the user was typing on the iPhone, right? So all these are what constituting the experiences at the behavioral level when the user has already started using the product, or when the user has already started experiencing the services that you are offering, or that you, for example, your organization is offering, right? So most of the time and many times what happens, that once the user has learned how to use the product, the next time when the user wants to use the product, mostly it will be motivated because the user want to achieve certain objectives, user wants to achieve certain goals. It may not only be motivated because the initial impression that the user had, right? So imagine you have the iPhone. When you saw the iPhone at the very first time, you were impressed by the iPhone, the design, the slimness, the weight, and so on and so forth, right? But once you have learned how to operate the phone, you may want to come back to using the usage of the iPhone because you want to achieve certain objectives. You want to make a phone call, you want to use the internet, you want to use the social media, and so on and so forth, right? So basically the functionalities are the ones which are deriving you, which are motivating you to come back to the usage of the product. It's not the initial impression anymore. Of course, the initial impression created an impression for you, it created a bond for you, it created a positive emotion for you, but now that is gone, right? Next time, this is the usability that is going to attract the user to come to the usage of the product or the services. So this is what is all is being captured at the behavioral level. Now, one thing that you may want to pay attention again here, that most of the things that are happening at the behavioral level, once the user has started using the products and the services, it may start coming as very, very subconsciously. So user, if there is a good product, if there is a good service, then at the behavioral level, what happens usually, that the user will not have to put a lot of effort consciously, and things will be happening most of the time subconsciously, and in a very pleasant manner. So for example, you know how to drive a car, and in the beginning, when you want to drive a car, you have to put a lot of effort in driving the car itself, that you have to pay a lot of attention to this, that, and then so on and so forth. But once you have learned how to drive a car, then you don't have to put a lot of focus on driving the car, right? I mean, you simply go inside the car, and you're sort of, your hands are already there at the steering, your feet is already there at the clutch, accelerator, and everything is already taken care of. So while you are the one who is doing these actions, your motors are the ones which are doing the actions, but most of these things are happening subconsciously, right? I mean, maybe you are not aware at the conscious level that, okay, maybe I'm putting a gear, for example, or I'm changing this clutch, I'm changing this brake. I mean, most of the things are happening at the subconscious level, because you are already very fluent in now the uses of the product, and you have become very comfortable in the uses of the product or the services. In this case, usage of the iPhone, usage of the car, and unless and until this starts happening, you would not like to do that again and again. So for example, if there is a car and you are not able to learn how to drive the car, or it has become very, very cumbersome, because there are multiple gears, and there are the gear is somewhere else, the steering operates in a certain way, and it's not very usable, it's not very functional, and you have to consciously put a lot of effort in using that product, in using that car. Maybe you would not like to do that again and again, you would like to avoid that particular experience, right? And hence, most of the things that happens here at the behavioral level happens in a very, very happens subconsciously. Other thing that you want to pay attention to this, that most of the experiences that are happening at the behavioral level can be monitored, can be measured in an objective way. This is in contrast to the visceral design or the visceral cognitive process, where most of the things were happening in a very, very subjective manner. So you did not had a lot of way to evaluate those experiences as well, right? I mean, it was very, very subjective. I like this design, I did not like this design. I like the symmetric design, I did not like the symmetric design. As simple as that. But when you are talking about the behavioral experiences, when you're talking about the behavioral design or the experiences at the behavioral cognitive level, then what is happening, that you are looking at the experiences that can be objectively measured. Is as simple as that. For example, you are trying to complete a particular task on iPhone, for example, maybe on your phone, maybe you want to make a call. Now, you can simply measure the amount of the time that it took for you to open the contact list, select the name of the person that you want to make a call, and in making a call, right? So, is as simple as that. These are very objective. Similarly, for example, you want to take a photo from the camera of the iPhone, the amount of time that you took to locate the camera app, open the camera app, focus on the user, and took the picture. So all these, there are so many behavioral metrics, there are so many behavioral indicators that you can use to objectively evaluate the experience of the user at this particular level, right? So that is what the cognitive processes that are happening at the behavioral level. And at the visceral level and at the behavioral level, both, there are lots of sensory inputs which are involved, but at the behavioral level, as I said, mostly since you are taking some actions, it's all about the usability. So your motor actions are very, very involved here, right? So it is motivated by some sensory inputs, and then it is it is reflected in some motor actions, such as the usability here. Now, the third is known as the reflective level. So the reflective level of the design, it mostly refers to the rationalization or the intellectual part of the experience, right? So basically, this is what is this? Basically, what happens here, that in the visceral, as we already understood, that in the visceral level, we are talking about the initial impression of using the product. In the behavioral level, we are talking about the usability of the product, we are talking about the usability of the services. Now in the reflective level, what the reflective level refers to, that okay, we have made a very good first impression, the usability is also good, the user is able to come back to the usability now, but at the third level, the user may want to evaluate the experience that the user had with the usage of the product or the services. So and this is where the rationalization happens, and this is where the intellectual part of the cognitive process comes into the picture. So now the user starts making, analyzing the usage experience, and starts analyzing the pros and the cons of the things. So it's like, you have already gone through an immersive experience, and the moment you came out of that immersive experience, now you may want to recall the experience that you had, and you want to analyze that, okay, whether that experience was good, bad, number one thing, was it worth it, was there a good return on investment? Maybe maybe it was not worth it, maybe I'm putting a lot of money, but the experience was good but was not worth it. Or maybe would I like to repeat this experience again and again? For example, would I be sharing this experience with someone else? Would I be telling this, okay, maybe, I use this particular product, I use this particular services, you should also use this because it's very, very enjoyable. So this is where, all this kind of thing happens, where the user thinks about whether the user wants to do it again and again and again, and at the same time whether the user wants to suggest the usage of the particular product or the services to the other users, and hence the user may want to do some kind of publicity for you. So this is what happens at the reflective level. So basically what happens, that of course, because lots of your thoughts, lots of your actions of using the product in a long term are motivated by this reflective cognitive processing, but at the same time it does not have a direct control or the connections, let's say, to the visceral level, because of course visceral level is very, very momentarily. You saw the product, you used the product, you saw the product, and it made a very first impression. You do not, the reflective process or the rationalization process did not come into the picture. Similarly for the usability, okay, once you have started using the product, you talk about the usability, the functionality, and the reliability of the product, but then that is there. But then on the top of, on the reflective level, you want to go upper in the user experience pyramid, and you want to think about the enjoyability. Did you enjoy the experience? You want to think about the pleasure that you have had, right? And then more importantly, you want to evaluate whether there was a good return on investment on this particular product or not, right? So most of the time the reflective, as I said, this is very, very there is a lot of rationalization here. So this is where the intellectual part of you or of your customer comes into the picture, and that is where you want to hit properly. Otherwise the user may evaluate that, okay, maybe the experience that I'm getting from the product is not worth it. Now enough about the emotional design, enough about that what are the different types of design. Now why are we talking about this in the course of the affective computing? So in the affective computing, in the beginning, we already talked about that affective computing is all about the emotional intelligence. It helps you to understand how to model the emotions, it helps you understand how to evaluate the user experience, and more importantly, how can you make an experience which is adaptive. Now here let us try to see that how the affective computing can help you in making a design at all the three different levels, in making an efficient design at all the three levels. So for example, if you are talking about the visceral design, now in the visceral design, as we already talked about here, in the visceral design, it's all about the initial impression. So basically what affective computing can do for you, what it can do for you, that it can help you in understanding the user's feelings, the user's first response, user's first impression when the user is using the product or the services. And why would you like to do that? You may want to understand that, for example, when I'm first time I bought an iPhone, first time I took the iPhone in my hand, how did I feel? I mean, what was my emotional expressions on my face? I mean, did I look joyful? Did I look happy? Did I look curious? What were the, for example, what were the emotions that were being expressed by my body language? What were the emotions that were expressed by my, for example, my physiological signals? As simple as that, if you have a way to measure it. So as simple as that, if you have a watch, maybe you want to see that what is exactly happening with my heart rate variability, and so on and so forth. So the good thing about all these things, the affective computing, is that on one hand, of course, you can have the subjective self-reporting questionnaire kind of thing, where where you give an iPhone to an user, and then you ask the user, okay, did you like it, did you see it, how did you felt it, how did you feel about the product, how did you feel about the first impression. And user may give whatever the user wants, right? And there could be a lot of biases that can come in understanding the user's response, or when the user is making a response here. And that is where affective computing can really help you a lot. So without having being asked to the user, you can simply, by looking at the facial expressions, looking at the different modalities through which the emotions are being expressed, you can look at those modalities, you can monitor those modalities, and you can you can capture these momentary reactions that the user is having while the user is using a particular phone or the product. And this is more true when, for example, you have to evaluate those experiences, impressions among n number of different users. Now imagine that there are 100 different users, and for the 100 different users, you give them 100 iPhones, and then of course you want to evaluate their first impression. In the absence of the affective computing, in the absence of automated monitoring or understanding of these emotions, emotional experience, what you will have to do, you will have to go to the each and every user, you will have to give them a form, and you will have to ask them, okay, did you like the product, how did it make you feel, did you like the design, did you like this, did you like that, and you know, that can be very cumbersome and tiresome process. So this is where affective computing can come into the picture. So we already saw in the earlier part of the lectures that how can we model the different types of emotions, and how those different types of emotions are expressed in different types of modalities. So now you can already analyze that what type of emotional experiences that you are envisioning, that you are hoping. So for example, maybe you are hoping for a smile on the user's face. Okay, so then how are you going to capture that smile? Maybe you want to put a camera, and then that camera, making use of sophisticated artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms, is capturing all the 100 users face at the same time, and it's analyzing all the 100 users at the same time, and it's creating an objective kind of report for you, right? So you don't have to go to the user and ask the user, but everything is happening in a very automated fashion, and hence the chances of introducing a bias is minimal, and you can use that experience and say that okay, maybe, you know, when I looked at the responses of the 100 users, the experience was not so positive. Maybe I don't know what happened. Maybe and then of course you can correlate it with other modalities. Maybe you can look at the gaze, you can look at the eye tracking sensors, you can look at the eye, pattern of the eye behavior, the gaze behaviors of the users, along with the facial emotions, and then you can combine these two, and you can see, okay, maybe when the user was looking at the upper part of the phone, for example, it did not felt as happy as it felt while it was looking at the box of the phone itself, the packaging of the phone itself, right? And so on and so forth. So by combining different modalities, you can get very interesting observations about the first impressions that your product or that your service is making onto the user, and hence this is how you can improve the first impression of the user when the user is using the product or the services, right? So that is the very first level, in brief, how affective computing can help you in creating a better design at the visceral level. Perfect. Now, having understood the visceral design, let us look at the behavioral design. So please recall, the behavioral design is all about the usability, is all about the functionalities of the product. Now, affective computing in this case, how can it help? What it can do, it can help you understanding the emotional experiences of the user while the user is using the product or the services in very real time, right? So for example, I'm just typing on a MacBook, and then while I'm typing on the MacBook, you are monitoring my typing speed, you are monitoring maybe my different modalities in which you are expecting the responses to be elicited. For example, even, you know, facial expressions, again, one is very good example. Again, maybe send some physiological signals, and of course, depending upon the resources that you have, you may want to introduce certain sensors while the user is using the product or the services. And by observing the data that you are capturing through those particular modalities, through those particular sensors, you may want to say that, you know, okay, maybe when the user, you know, in general, the user liked the MacBook, for example, but when the user started typing on the MacBook, maybe the typing experience was not as good as the experience maybe that the user was having on, let's say, typing when the user was typing on particular XYZ computer or a laptop, right? So you can compare these experiences in a very, very objective fashion, and then you can combine these experiences as the data, as it is being observed through different modalities. And more importantly, it allows you to capture the experience not only during a particular task that is, let's say, resulting in a success, but also during the tasks that are resulting in a failure, for example. And then you want to analyze where exactly they are failing and how exactly they are failing. So for example, there is an UI that you created, and maybe let us take example of iPhone again. Maybe in the iPhone itself, I launched the home screen, and on the home screen there are n different types of apps, but unfortunately what happens due to the design or whatever, that maybe all the apps, they are being represented more or less in the same color, for example, right? And then what happens that, okay, you will have a very hard time in locating the app that you want to open. So for example, maybe I just want to open Gmail, but all the other apps are looking like just like the Gmail in the color and everything, the logo and everything. So it will be difficult for you to locate that particular app and then to launch that particular app. So for example, one way that you can measure that, okay, it resulted in a kind of failure, that by amount of time that it took for the user to start in locating the particular app, that is one, let's say, behavioral response. And then while the user was doing this, of course, user will start showing some frustration, and that frustration, that emotional experiences that user is having while it is not able to do certain things, you can capture through facial expressions, you can capture through certain modalities, and using those modalities, using those data, you can analyze that what went wrong, when did it went wrong, and how can you create a better emotional flow process through the better design of the entire thing, right? So now the last but not the least, so this is the reflective design, how the affective computing can help you on the reflective, on designing the process or the products in a better way at the reflective level. So now here what can be done, that as you understood, the reflective design is all about the post usage experience. It's about that I use the particular product, and after having used it, how did I feel about the product? It's as simple as that. So what you can do, once the user has already used the product, you can simply put the user through all the affective computing technologies and sensors and the modalities, and then you may want the user to recall the experience of a particular product or a service, for example, having gone through a roller coaster ride, and then you want to see that, okay, while the user is recalling that particular experience, is the similar type of emotion being elicited when the user was actually using the product, or maybe when the user was having the first impression of the product, right? And if not, maybe this is a very good indication that, okay, maybe the user will not be able to create a very strong loyalty with the product or the services that you are offering, and maybe the user will not be able to come back for the usage of the services, right? So this is how you create, you try to understand the post usage emotional experience of the service or the product, and then you can try to see that how can you create, how the affective computing can help you in creating a better emotional bond, right? So that's all about the affective computing and the emotional design. I hope that you were able to understand that what the emotional design refers to and how affective computing can help you to create better loyalty or the bonding with the product, right? So see you in the next lecture. Thanks.